My name is Evelyn. I'm 68 years old. When I was diagnosed with a rare aneurysm, my family was told I had a month to live. My daughter said there was nothing they could do because they were planning to buy a new car. My son said he was in debt and didn't want to help with my treatment either. The clock in the office ticked too loudly, as if everything around me was rushing to live for me. A month, he repeated softly, too soft for a sentence. I nodded, adjusted my headscarf, and thanked him. The house smelled of chamomile tea and yesterday's apple pie. On the table were framed family photos, everyone smiling as if a smile could cement love forever. I called the children. We need to talk. They arrived quickly, faster than usual. I put the kettle on and prepared the very same cups from the set we'd chosen together before my granddaughter's birth. I wanted the conversation to be warm. I have an aneurysm, I said without the lace. The doctors are giving us a month. My daughter hugged me lightly, the way you might hug a fragile vase in a store, carefully but without any desire to buy it. My son stared at the table, arranging the crumbs into neat lines. He always does that when he's nervous. Mom, she spoke first. We really can't do anything. You understand, right? The money we have, we were saving up for a car. It's important. We need to drive safely with the baby. And anyway, treatment, it doesn't guarantee it. And then there's the debt. She spoke evenly, almost confidently, and only her fingers trembled. Not from compassion, no, from the fact that she herself was afraid to say out loud what she'd decided long ago. I have debts too, my son added, not looking at me. Big ones. I can't handle it. I'm sorry, I nodded again. The kettle was boiling. On the wall, the same clock ticked, the same one that had ticked my whole life, at weddings, at christenings, at funerals. I took the kettle off the stove, poured boiling water, and the steam hid their faces for a second. When it cleared, I felt better. It's amazing how much freedom insight brings. I understand, I said, even smiling. You've put everything in its proper place. The car, the debts, the month. Thank you for coming. We drank tea. They talked about the weather, the traffic, about holding on. I listened and made another list in my head. The keys to the dacha, the documents in the bottom drawer of the cupboard, the hiding place under the sewing machine, phone numbers I hadn't used in a long time. I remembered my late husband saying, if your back is against the wall, look for the door, not the wall. I always found doors. It's just that in old age, we forget where they are. After the children left, I took the hospital bracelet off my wrist and placed it next to the family photos. Let it lie here among the perfect smiles. I wiped the table with a clean rag. No crumbs remained, and then my son would have approved. Then I took an old leather folder from the closet, the one where I kept all the important things you couldn't trust to the hearts of others. I didn't yet know who had signed my death warrant, illness or something worse, but I knew for sure that my last month wouldn't be someone else's saving. This would be my month. And if it meant cutting open a few of someone else's beautiful packages, I would. I set down the cups, washed and upended them on the rack, and finally let my back rest against the counter. The tile was cool. I heard my own breath like I used to hear my babies breathing when they were small, that soft whistle that told me we were okay. Now I asked myself out loud, because the empty kitchen needed the truth to echo. How could my son do this to me? I took out a yellow legal pad and wrote, 1 month is still 30 days, and 30 days is 30 chances. I circled chances twice. I did not write treatment, not yet. I wrote clarity, then plan. I've never been a loud woman, but I understand leverage. You don't have to scream when you know where the hinge is. I slept in clean pajamas, no headscarf, and opened the window an inch so the late fall air could cut through the stale hospital smell that had followed me home. In the morning, I made oatmeal and sat with a spoon warming my palm. I called the clinic to confirm the follow-up appointment, and while I was on hold, I thought about the way my daughter's eyes slid off mine like a kid stepping around a puddle. She had always been the practical one, the list maker. I used to think that would save her from cruelty. Now I understood lists can be shields or weapons. I wore jeans, not slacks, and sneakers I could move in. I pulled my hair into a low ponytail. Without a scarf, I felt like myself. My neighbor Marla spotted me as I locked the door and asked if I needed a ride. I'm good, I said. But save me a slice of that pumpkin bread you bake. I might drop by later. She squeezed my hand. You do that. The bus ride gave me time to watch people. A boy in a hoodie offered his seat to a woman whose belly led the way by a month or two. She sat and sighed thanks like that seat was a porch swing on a hot day. I smiled. I am not sentimental, but kindness, when it shows up without asking for a receipt, still gets me. At the clinic, fluorescent lights hummed like tired bees. I signed my name, and I noticed something I hadn't noticed before. The pens at the front desk were chained down. Of course they were. Everyone is afraid of theft in a place where the most precious thing is leaving you minute by minute. It made me want to laugh. The doctor explained options, non-options, percentages. He kept his voice soft, like a radio host after midnight. I nodded when appropriate. There's a way to listen that looks like agreement, but is really inventory. I took inventory of every phrase. Rare, urgent, monitoring, and I took inventory of my own thoughts, the old sewing machine tucked in my hall, the little cash my husband and I had saved for a trip we never took, the faces of my grandkids with cereal milk on their lips. If this was my last month, I'd spend it counting the right things. Back home, I brewed tea, chamomile again. Habit is a comfort blanket that still fits, even when nothing else does. I opened my leather folder and checked the tabs, bills, mortgage, insurance, wills. My husband and I had done the dull work once, and now I was grateful for our boredom back then. He used to say, do your paperwork when times are boring. Then when life gets loud, you can listen. Life was loud now, but the folder spoke calmly to me. I dialed my daughter, asked how the baby was, listened to the story about a loose tooth that wasn't loose but felt that way. When she asked how I was, I said, better than yesterday. Not as good as tomorrow. A small truth. She promised to call later. My son texted a thumbs up. He was always a boy of symbols, rather than sentences. I held the phone and stared at that thumb until the screen went dark. I made a list of rooms in my house and the secrets they kept. Not gossipy secrets, but the kind of secrets you keep to stay steady. Extra checkbook in the sewing basket, the spare key taped under the third drawer, the flash drive in the flour tin. It's not paranoia when you raised kids through the 80s. And learn to hide the good cookies behind the canned peas. The next day, I invited my kids over again just for dinner. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans with onions. I picked up a store-bought pie and put it on my own cake stand so it would feel homemade. And yes, I know that's a silly trick, but sometimes a house must look more generous than its budget. When they came, I noticed the new stroller in my daughter's trunk, plastic still on the wheels. My son hugged me a beat too long, his cologne familiar and foreign at once. We ate, and we talked about the neighbor who decorated too early, about the choir at church sounding surprisingly good with a new director, about the price of eggs. They didn't bring up the month. I didn't either. After dishes, I asked my son to help me move the old cedar chest from my bedroom to the hall. He grunted, we laughed at our knees, and then I pretended to forget my phone in the bedroom and slipped back in. I opened the nightstand and placed a note inside, written for me more than anyone. Don't sign anything on a bad day. I shut the drawer and rejoined them. I didn't need to catch them at anything, not then. I just wanted to feel the weight of the chest leave the room, like proof that heavy things can move when you ask for help, though not always the help you thought you needed. They left early, citing errands and bath time. I stood on the porch and waved. When the taillights disappeared, I went inside and called my old friend Patty, who used to be a nurse, and I asked for a second set of ears at my next appointment. Bring coffee, she said. Doctors are nicer to the person holding coffee. We laughed, and then we didn't. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, like it, and let us know in the comments what time it is where you are listening to this story. I slept badly. The ceiling fan ticked. Somewhere a dog barked at a life I couldn't see. I woke before dawn and sat at my kitchen table staring at the legal pad. I wrote, I love my kids. I won't be their mark. At church that Sunday, Pastor Jim preached on the parable of the talents. The part I heard was this: the servant who did nothing wasn't punished for caution. He was punished for burying what wasn't his to bury. It hit me like a clean bell. My life isn't theirs to bury, not even with my permission. I shook hands at the door. I smiled at familiar faces. I hugged Marla and took a warm slice of pumpkin bread wrapped in foil. And for a second, I tasted normalcy, and it tasted like butter. As the clocks just fell back, I hope you got an extra hour of rest this weekend. When I got home, I pulled out the sturdiest purse I own and packed it with what I'd need if I had to spend a day chasing answers. Snacks, water, a small notebook, a pen I bought myself, not chained to any counter. I added a lightweight scarf, not for my head, but because buildings are cold when they want to make you feel small. And on Monday, I called the clinic billing office and asked for an itemized list of charges, pretending I needed to double-check for my records. The woman on the phone used the kind of politeness you learn in training modules. Crisp, kind, not warm. "You'll receive it by email," she said. I thanked her, and then I called Patty to confirm she'd be at my follow-up. "What's your plan?" she asked. "To listen for the thing they don't expect me to hear," I said. The appointment came, and I walked in with a smile that said, "I've been underestimated before." It didn't stick. Patty sat beside me, legal pad in her lap. The doctor repeated percentages, the same soft words. Patty asked about imaging. He glanced at the screen. "Yes, we have you scheduled for..." I watched his eyes, not his mouth. His eyes did a quick skip, like a stone thrown wrong. Noted. When I left, I didn't go straight home. I went to the chapel they keep on the ground floor, a quiet room with a wooden cross and 2 stained glass windows that cast colors on the carpet. I'm not a saint. I'm a woman who knows where chairs are when she needs to sit. I sat. I breathed. I said thank you for the stubbornness I inherited from my mother, who once returned a vacuum because it didn't have enough suck, and stood there until the manager fixed it. Stubbornness is not pretty, but it can be holy. Back in my kitchen, I opened the leather folder again and I wrote across a fresh sheet, "Every kindness is recorded. Every injury, too not for revenge, though I won't deny the thought warmed my palms, but for remembrance. Memory is how we stitch ourselves back together." That evening, my daughter called. "Mom, how are you feeling?" she asked. I told her the truth that was safe. Tired but clear. She told me about the test drive they'd scheduled, how the new model had better safety features, how it would practically drive itself. "That's something," I said. There was a silence in which I heard my own heart. "I'll swing by tomorrow," she added. "We can go through your mail, make sure nothing is overdue." The words sounded helpful. The tone felt like management. After the call, I stood in front of the mirror and practiced saying, "No thank you," with a smile. I practiced saying, "I'll let you know," like a person who owns her calendar. I practiced saying nothing and letting silence do the work. Then I sat on the couch and looked at the clock on the wall, the same cheap thing that had ticked through birthdays and holidays. I thought about how sound makes a house feel alive. I thought about how a month can be a sentence or a start. At midnight, I finally slept. I dreamed of my husband fixing a hinge with the good screwdriver, the one he kept hidden so no one would use it on paint cans. In the dream, he looked up and said, "This door's still good, just needs a steady hand." I woke up smiling into the dark and knew I had mine. I arrived for my follow-up appointment alone, without a headscarf. I didn't want to look sicker than I was. The hallway smelled of bleach and patience. A nurse with tired eyes called my last name, and I noticed she stumbled over the letter Y when she read it. In the office, the doctor repeated the exact same words without a single hesitation, as if he were reading from a script. Aneurysm size, location, risk, options for monitoring. I listened in fragments, asked questions I didn't expect honest answers to, and only nodded when I should have. On the way out, the nurse caught up with me at the elevator and thrust a thin gray envelope into my palm. "Look at this at home," she whispered, and disappeared. At home, I closed the curtains, turned on the desk lamp, and cut open the envelope with scissors. On the first page is a printout of the MRI, The date and time match my examination, but in the top corner, the patient's age is 10 years younger. On the second page is the same section, the same markings, but on the black background of the screen is a tiny sticker with my last name. On the third page is internal correspondence. Combine case, enter manually. There are no signatures, only initials. I sat in silence and listened to the lamp crackle from the heat. Whose images are these? Where are mine? Why is someone younger in the system instead of me? An error? Or is it not an error and not instead, but together? I placed the images next to the discharge summary they gave me that morning. In one place, my last name is spelled with an E instead of an Y-O. A small inaccuracy, but I was born from such inaccuracies. They underpin someone else's entire plan. I picked up my phone and scrolled through 5 other contacts I hadn't called in a while. A classmate who became a lawyer, a neighbor who worked security at a clinic, a cousin whose nephew I once helped get into college. I didn't ask them for help. I just asked questions that suddenly make people remember they have a conscience too. I hid the envelope in a folder and the copies where no one would think to look, under the sewing machine in a box of raw linen thread. If my name was attached to someone else's diagnosis, it meant someone had a reason, and I had time to find out. I didn't sleep. I rehearsed. There's a difference between worry and rehearsal. Worry chews through you. Rehearsal builds a muscle. I practiced my face in the mirror, the one I used when my kids were teenagers, and I needed to look calm when I was anything but. Then I called Patty. If I ask you to be loud, be loud. If I ask you to be quiet, be a well, I said. I'm good at both, she said. I've been married twice. The next morning, I called the clinic and asked for my records for personal reasons. They asked for a form, then a fee, then 3 to 5 business days. I said, I'll come in. The woman on the phone said, that won't be necessary. I said, good, because I'm already in the parking lot. It was a small lie, but a useful one. She sighed and told me to wait 30 minutes. I made coffee at home and came in an hour later because a woman who rushes looks scared, and a scared woman is told to be patient. At the window, a young man with perfect hair handed me a packet with my name spelled correctly on the label. I didn't open it there. I put it in my purse, thanked him, and turned to go. That's when the nurse with tired eyes brushed past me and said under her breath, "Don't sign anything." She kept walking. I stood there blinking like someone had turned the lights up too fast. "Don't sign anything." The words landed like a stone on a pond. The circles spread. Outside, I sat in my car and called my daughter. "Hi, honey," I said. "Could you come over tonight? I'd love help sorting a few papers." She sounded relieved. "Of course," she said. "We'll come after the dealership." "Oh, can we bring dinner? Maybe salads?" I said. "Anything you bring will be perfect." I hung up and stared through the windshield until the world focused again. I asked myself the question I swore I wouldn't have to ask. How could my daughter put a price tag on me? Back home, I opened the clinic packet. There were lab results I recognized and imaging summaries I didn't. The radiology note referenced prior studies, but listed a date I'd never been in a machine. The chart said I had reported headaches last year. I hadn't. It also said I had refused a certain medication because of preference. I hadn't been offered it. I underlined preference 3 times. Preference is a doily word laid over a stain. I called the number on the bottom of the page and asked to speak to the imaging manager. He was in a meeting. I left my number and wrote in my notebook, "They stonewall, I build a wall of stone." Then I took a walk to steady my breath. The maple on the corner had dropped every leaf like a dress on the floor. Bold, sudden, no apology. A neighbor waved. I waved back and felt normal for 8 seconds, which is sometimes all you get. That evening, my daughter and son-in-law came with salads in plastic bowls and a bag of dinner rolls. My son came later, offering a 6-pack of seltzer like an alibi. We ate around the table. I told them about the nurse, the envelope, the records. My daughter's face arranged itself into concern. "Mom, I'm sure it's just a mistake," she said, the way people say, "I'm sure it's just allergies" when your voice is gone. "Hospitals mess things up all the time." My son rubbed his eyebrow. "You know how systems are," he said. "Nothing works right." I looked at him. Some things work exactly as designed, I said. After dinner, I set a stack of mail on the table. Can you help me go through these? I asked. I'd asked like all casual. Yeah, my daughter sorted envelopes with quick fingers, the way she used to braid her Barbie's hair in church when she was bored. Now my son-in-law opened a thick one. Appointment reminder, he said. They want you in next week. He hesitated. They also want you to consider an advance directive. He said it like the words were soup too hot to sip. We can talk about that later, I said, and smiled so it would land soft. Inside, I felt a click. Someone was trying to speed up the paperwork while slowing down my brain. My son offered to take out the trash. I watched him tie the bag and noticed him glance at the recycle bin where I'd stashed the clinic envelope under a magazine. When he returned, he wiped his hands on his jeans. You should let me have a key, he said, in case anything happens. I said, you already have one? You copied it when you were 17 and wanted to sneak in after curfew? He laughed, startled that I remembered, maybe more startled that I didn't sound mad. I wasn't. I was taking inventory. When they left, I hugged my daughter and whispered, I love you. She whispered, we just want you comfortable. The word hung there. Comfortable, like a throw blanket you pull up over a truth. After the door closed, my house exhaled. I washed the bowls, dried them, put them away with more noise than necessary, because sometimes a woman needs to hear herself make order. The next morning, Patty and I went back to the clinic. She wore her teacher face, the one she used on residents who got cocky. We asked for the nurse with tired eyes. She's off today, the desk clerk said. I can take a message. I wrote thank you on a sticky note and asked the clerk to give it to her. And this, I added, sliding a small envelope addressed to a friend. Inside, I had put a gift card for a grocery store and a note. For your honesty tax. My husband taught me to pay people when their courage costs them something. It's not a bribe, it's a thank you with teeth. In the imaging office, Patty asked why my records referenced prior scans. The tech glanced at the screen. Looks like a merged chart, she said. Sometimes the system pulls in another patient with a similar name and we have to deduplicate. I said, how often do you deduplicate aneurysms? She blinked. It's rare? So is mine, I said. She looked at Patty. Patty looked back like a mirror that refuses to flatter. We'll escalate, the tech said. It could take time. Time is what your doctor said I don't have, I answered. She swallowed. I'll flag it, stat. We sat in the lobby. A TV played a morning show where two hosts joked about holiday pies and one mentioned a charity food drive. I thought about the casserole chain we make in this country when someone dies or has a baby. I thought not for the first time that maybe casseroles are how we say, I can't fix it, but I can make it warm. On the way out, a man in a suit stopped me. Mrs. Carter, he said. I'm from Patient Relations. He handed me a brochure. He said words like satisfaction and feedback. I said, I'll give you both if you give me my actual file. He smiled the way people do when they want to look kind without making a promise. I took the brochure anyway. You never know which flimsy thing will be the paper trail that matters. At home, I opened my laptop and created a folder named Truth. I scanned the MRI copies, the misprinted surname, the discharge summary. I wrote a timeline. I added a column for who benefits. I put my kids' names there and my stomach flipped. Then I took a deep breath and typed another column. Alternative explanations. I listed clerical error, lazy doctor, algorithm glitch. I am not a monster hunter by hobby. I am a mother who knows that sometimes you are a suspect in your own life and you have to clear yourself. I decided to behave as if I would live. It sounds simple, but it changed my posture. I sat up straighter. I made a dentist appointment I had put off. I texted my friend Rita to ask for her pecan pie recipe because I plan to bake it for Christmas. And planning for Christmas when November is barely here is a prayer with butter in it. That afternoon, the imaging manager called. We discovered a crosslink in the system, he said. We're correcting it. I asked what crosslink meant in human language. 2 charts were combined, he said. Parts of another patient's imaging were erroneously labeled under your name. Was she 10 years younger? I asked. Long pause. I can't disclose that. You already did? He walked it back with bureaucratic grace. We're very sorry, he said. Please come in for a repeat scan. I said, on one condition. I want a copy, printed, handed to me, with my name spelled correctly, and I want Patty in the room. He hesitated. That's unusual. So is a crosslink, I said. He agreed. That evening, my son texted, how'd it go? I replied, they made mistakes. Fixing them. He sent back, told you systems are dumb. I typed, then deleted. Systems do what people tell them to do. Instead, I wrote, can you come by tomorrow? I need you to move some boxes. He said, sure. I did need help with boxes. I also needed to see his face when he looked at my pillbox because that morning I had found the pillbox lid not quite aligned, like someone had set it down with care, but not the habit of care. I have the habit. I have the lines my husband teased me about. I put the remote in the same place forever. That small angle was a siren I didn't confront. I made space on the counter for the conversation to climb out of the floorboards when it was ready. When my son arrived, we carried boxes to the attic. He cracked jokes about my Christmas lights. He wiped sweat with his sleeve and looked like my little boy for a flash, the one who used to bring me dandelions and call them sunflowers. Downstairs, I asked him to open a jar of pickles I had loosened already. He twisted with too much force and the lid popped easy. He laughed, surprised by his own strength. I handed him a glass of water. He drank, put the glass down next to the pillbox, and tapped the lid once, absent-mindedly straightening it. I felt a chill skate up my neck. He knew the lid wasn't square. You okay, Mom? He asked. You look pale. I'm fine, I said. And because truth matters in small doses too, I added, I'm thinking about how much I've carried alone. He shifted. We're here, he said. We'll help. The word help can mean anything. A hand up, a hand out, or a hand in your pocket. I couldn't tell which hand he was offering. After he left, I called my lawyer classmate, Brenda. I didn't ask for legal advice. I asked for a practice exercise. Tell me what you'd do if you thought someone was preparing a person to sign things she didn't understand, I said. Brenda didn't ask names. I'd set a trap that looks like a shortcut, she said. People who plan those things like shortcuts. I thanked her and wrote shortcut in my notebook like it was a recipe I planned to try. The repeat scan happened. Patty was in the room. My name was spelled correctly. The tech was careful with her words like a baker measuring flour. After, the doctor called me into his office. The aneurysm is present, he said, voice still soft, but smaller than initially reported. We recommend monitoring, not immediate intervention. I looked at Patty. She tapped her pen 3 times under the table. I heard that too. So I have more than a month? I asked. He shifted. Prognoses vary, but yes, this isn't as urgent as the record previously suggested. I could have cried. I didn't. Not there. I saved it for my car, where I cried like the steering wheel was an old friend who wouldn't tell. On the drive home, I rolled the windows down, even though the air had a bite. I wanted the wind to cut through the stale fear. When I got home, I called my kids. Good news, I said. It's smaller than we thought. My daughter said, oh, wow, that's great. She sounded like someone whose wedding had been postponed without penalty. My son said, so you're okay? I'm okay enough, I said. Through the phone, I heard a notification ping, then another, like someone's plans were dinging and redrawing lines. That night, I baked a small pan of brownies because chocolate is how I mark survival. I wrapped 2 pieces in foil and took them to Marla. We stood in her doorway talking about the city's leaf pickup schedule and the school fundraiser collecting canned goods. I said I'd drop off some peanut butter jars. She hugged me and said, you look lighter. I said, I am. Back in my kitchen, I opened the leather folder and put the clean imaging report inside. On another sheet, I wrote, if they wanted me confused, they should have picked a different mother. I sharpened a pencil. I placed it next to the phone. I arranged the pillbox so its lid was perfectly square. Then I set a blank piece of paper in the center of the table and placed a pen beside it like bait. I folded it back the way I found it. I kissed my granddaughter's forehead. I smiled when my daughter returned. I asked for a glass of water and looked at the clock and said I needed to get supper started at home. I walked to my car like my bones were the same age they were yesterday. Because they were. I sat behind the wheel and set my hands at 10 and 2 and thought, if they plan to manage me, I will show them what management really looks like. I don't like rummaging through other people's things, but sometimes other people's things just fall out of your way. When I went to visit my granddaughter, a corner of a form was sticking out of my daughter's wastepaper basket. The paper smelled of printer's ink and haste. I picked it up and smoothed it out. Power of attorney in case of incapacity. The blank signature lines were marked with sticky notes. The date was next Wednesday. In the margin, someone's neat hand, son had written, Notary, 3:30 p.m., convinced sign in advance. I folded the form back up and put it back down, but something clicked inside me. That evening, while my son-in-law was helping his daughter with her homework, a notification flashed on his laptop screen. Life insurance. Payment upon occurrence. I don't like prying, but sometimes chance is just a well-prepared glance. I remembered the name of the company. At home, I found an old folder with my husband's documents. My daughter had once asked for it to get things in order. At the very bottom, between the registration document and the old warranty card, lay a fresh policy with today's official seals. The beneficiary was my daughter. The issue date was 6 months ago. Note, death from natural causes, full coverage, payment within 30 days. I sat on the edge of the bed and held the document the way you hold someone else's child, carefully, afraid to drop it. Perhaps this truly was prudence. Perhaps my daughter simply can't talk about fear but can fill out forms. But then, why was the power of attorney for incapacitation marked with a future date and time, like a visit to the stylist? Why did anyone assume I would no longer be able to say no by now? I put the policy back in my husband's folder. He always believed in direct decisions, and I in quiet steps. I dialed the number of a notary I knew and asked for a simple favor. If you're asked to notarize my signature in the next few days, call me. I want to come in person. He hesitated but agreed. I crossed out the old phone numbers in my address book and added new ones, and a simple diagram formed in my head. Diagnosis, substitution, insurance policy, power of attorney. 4 lines converging at a single point. I wonder who's at the center, me or someone's greed. That night, I didn't sleep. I made chamomile and walked the hallway the way I used to when the baby was colicky, and the only way to soothe her was to keep moving. The page with sticky notes glowed in my mind. Incapacity. Such a clean word for such a dirty wish. I stood in the kitchen and whispered into the dark, how could my daughter prepare to silence me while I'm still talking? Morning brought backbone. I called Brenda, my old classmate who now wears suits that mean something. I didn't ask for a full consult. Hypothetical, I said. If a woman suspects family is planning papers she doesn't want, what can she do to keep her voice hers? Brenda sighed. Hypothetically, document capacity now with a neutral witness. Put it in your medical chart. And do your own documents first. Advance directive, springing power to someone you trust. The one who never asks for your checkbook is the one you pick. I thanked her. She added, and if anyone pushes you to sign fast, that's your sign to slow down. I hung up and called Pastor Jim. Can you come by for coffee and be my witness? I asked. He has the patience of a man who can sit through committee meetings without complaining. He arrived with oatmeal cookies and a prayer that didn't sound like television. We talked about nothing. Then I read a short statement into my phone's recorder, dated it out loud, and asked him to sign the copy I printed. He did. You always were the organized one, he said. Only when cornered, I replied. Around lunch, my daughter called. Mom, are you up for a quick errand on Wednesday? It's just some paperwork to make things easier while you rest. Her voice had that bright coating you put on a hard candy. What kind of paperwork? I asked. Just standard stuff, she said. We'll swing by and pick you up. Send me the forms first, I said. Silence. We'll bring them, she said. Mom, no need to fuss. Text a photo, I repeated. I read better in daylight. She said she would. She didn't. I stepped onto the porch and breathed the thin, leaf-sweet air. Across the street, Marla wrestled with her inflatable turkey. It listed like a boat without an anchor. I helped her straighten it, and we laughed until we were breathless. It felt good to laugh, without anyone watching my face for signs. I told her, lightly, that I was putting a few things in order. Need me to be on a list? She asked. Yes, I said. Emergency contact. And if I ever call you with the words blue sweater, you tell whoever you're with that you have to go and you come get me. She didn't ask why. She wrote it down. When Wednesday came, I wore my blue cardigan, the good one with elbows that keep their shape. I put 2 pens in my purse and a tiny voice recorder the size of a lip balm. Before they arrived, I called the notary I trusted and told him I wouldn't be coming. It only took me a second to understand I needed another notary, one who would not stamp a page I refused to sign. So I called the notary, whose name was on the sticky note. This is Evelyn, I said. Before 3:30 today, I want to make sure you require the signer to read the document and confirm understanding. Some notaries do group appointments and rush the reading. He coughed. Yes, ma'am, of course. It was the I wanted. I wrote his hesitation down. It's a habit now, like checking the oven twice. My daughter and son-in-law arrived right on schedule, smelling like new car interior and peppermint gum. My son texted that he'd meet us there, which I translated as, keep your head down. In the car, my daughter smiled too much. We'll just pop in, she said, and then maybe grab soup. Lovely, I said, folding my hands like I had when she got her braces tightened, simply to keep from flinching. At the office, the notary had 3 documents lined up, little flags marking where to sign. We'll get through this quickly, he chirped. I uncapped my pen and didn't touch the paper. I'll read them first. My daughter shifted. Wait, Mom, we went over this. It's just a precaution. If it's a precaution, it can withstand my eyes, I said. I started to read. When I came to the sentence that gave my daughter immediate control to make decisions without my consent, I looked up. This says, effective upon signing, not springing upon incapacity. The notary cleared his throat. Standard wording, he said. Not my favorite standard, I replied. My daughter's mouth tightened. Mom, this is what the lawyer recommended, she said. Which lawyer? I asked. A friend from the mom group, she said, her husband. Then he can meet us here and explain why I should sign away my voice while I still have it, I said. My son entered then, late enough to be innocent. He hugged me, smelled like aftershave and something sharper. He glanced at the papers and whistled low. That's a lot, he said. We can do it later if you're tired. I looked at both my children and thought, if I hadn't found those pages, would I be tired on cue for them right now? I pulled the tiny recorder from my pocket and set it next to my phone in plain sight. Before we do anything, I said, I want to understand why you think I need this today. My daughter's eyes flared, a quick, bright thing. Because you're sick, Mom. We have to plan. We are planning, I said. I am planning. And my plan is to keep my handwriting until it naturally becomes shaky. She swallowed. My son rubbed a thumb over the table edge like he could sand down the moment. The notary coughed again. If you're not comfortable, we can reschedule, he said. There's nothing to reschedule, I answered. These don't protect me. They protect everyone else from me. I capped my pen and slipped it into my purse. We're done. Back in the car, no one spoke. At a red light, my daughter said, You're making this harder than it needs to be. Her voice trembled the way it did when she was 10 and I said no to a sleepover because the parents weren't home. Harder for whom? I asked, and the quiet sat between us like a third passenger. I looked out the window and watched a woman with a silver bun walk her terrier, both of them trotting with purpose. I wanted that purpose to live in me. I decided it would. We stopped at a cafe for soup, but the soup tasted like a test. My daughter tried for small talk. I let words skim. How's the baby sleeping? Fine. How's the choir? Still off key? How's your head? She asked finally. Clear, I said. Clear enough to know I'll be changing some things. She stirred her soup and didn't look up. I realized the only thing more powerful than their plan for my life was my decision to narrate it myself. I went home and called my bank. I set up alerts for unusual activity and added a second password, the kind you only remember because it's the punchline to a family story no one else finds funny. I walked through the house and took pictures of the things that matter, not because I thought they'd go missing, but because I wanted a record of what love had bought and time had softened. My husband's dent in the armchair, the nick on the kitchen table from when my son learned to slice bread and cut too deep, the quilt I sewed the year my daughter had mono, and we watched the whole world from a couch. That evening, my son called. Sorry about earlier, he said. We just want to make sure you're protected. I said, it didn't feel like protection. He exhaled. You don't trust us. I looked at the leather folder on the table. I trust you to be yourselves, I said. I'm adjusting to who that is right now. He was quiet. Then he said, I'll swing by tomorrow, bring you those crosswords you like. We hung up and I sat with the ache of wanting to believe him, the ache of knowing belief has to be earned. Thursday morning, the imaging manager called again. Your corrected records are finalized, he said. You'll receive a certified copy. I thanked him, and after I hung up, I let myself cry for exactly 5 minutes, the length of a song. Then I wiped my face, made coffee, and called Pastor Jim back. Can you come sign a second statement? I asked. This one says, I refuse to appoint anyone who tells me they're doing it for my comfort. He chuckled. You always did have a way with a line. It's not a line, I said. It's a fence. That afternoon, I went to see my granddaughter's picture day photos. She looks like cotton candy and mischief. When my daughter stepped into the kitchen for a moment, my son-in-law lingered in the doorway. This is hard, he said, eyes darting. We're scared. Fear doesn't get my signature, I replied. Love gets my listening. Honesty gets my pen. He nodded, then said something I didn't expect. There's pressure, he whispered. Some of it isn't ours. From where? I asked. He shook his head. I shouldn't say. The baby cried and the moment collapsed, but I carried his words home like a coin you don't spend until you know what it buys. At home, I checked the battery on the tiny camera my neighbor had given me months ago, because you're stubborn and people are opportunists. I hadn't used it. I wasn't going to. Not yet. But the thought that I could watch my own kitchen when I wasn't in it felt like standing on a porch with a porch light that actually works. Evening fell fast, like it does after daylight saving spins us around. I texted Marla to see if she wanted leftover soup. She said yes and sent a picture of the sky over our street, pink and soft as a good sweater. Looks like a Hallmark movie out there, she wrote. I walked the bowl across and we stood on her porch talking about the food bank drive at the school and how folks are donating more this year. And back inside, I made a list titled, What Happens Next If I'm Right? Under it, I wrote, someone will try again, but with more sugar. Someone will bring a gift. Someone will angle for the pillbox. I underlined the last one. My husband used to say, if you want to know a plan, watch what they handle without thinking. The hand knows the habit. I cleaned my kitchen until it shone, not because I expected company, but because order makes me brave. Friday, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mrs. Carter? A man asked. This is Tom with Family Assurance. We're confirming the beneficiary details were received. For what? I asked. Your life insurance policy update, he said. The one purchased 6 months ago. I swallowed. And who initiated that? Your authorized contact, he said. Name starts with D. Thank you, I said, and I hung up. D, my daughter. I sat at the table and let the ugly facts air out like a rug you beat to see what comes flying out. I asked myself, how do I stay soft and still be steel? I called Brenda again. I won't pursue a war, I said, but I will build a case I can live with. She said, good, Start with truth they can't deny, then a choice they can't spin. And remember, sometimes you win by not giving what they came for. Saturday, my son showed up with crosswords and cinnamon rolls that left grease moons on the paper bag. He kissed my forehead and looked around the kitchen, not quite meeting my eyes. Want me to fix that cabinet door? He asked, pointing to the one that squeaks. Please, I said. He took out a small screwdriver, my late husband's, unless there's a clone of it in every hardware store, and got to work. While he bent to the hinge, his hip brushed the counter and his fingers drummed near the pillbox. Rhythmic, thoughtless. I watched without watching. He straightened, smiled. There, he said. Good as new. He washed his hands and left the water running a beat too long. Noise covers noise. I turned it off and felt the world tilt half an inch. That night, I made tea and sat with my leather folder. I slipped my clean imaging report on top, then my capacity statement, then a printed copy of my voice recording transcript. In a fresh envelope, I wrote 2 names, my daughter's and my son's. I wasn't writing them out of my life. I was writing them into a story where they would have to read themselves. I slept in the blue cardigan tossed on the chair because sometimes armor looks like softness. At 3 a.m., I woke to a small sound, not in the house, but in me, the last click of doubt loosening. If they wanted my month to be a countdown, I would turn it into a count-up. 1 decision, 2 protections, 3 witnesses, and then I would wait. Sunday morning, I stood in the kitchen, the pillbox lid perfectly square, the pens aligned, the paper blank again in the middle of the table. I brewed chamomile and set 2 cups, because I expected company, and because the person who thinks they're coming for you often expects to be welcomed. I planned to greet whoever came with the kind of warmth that lets a person hang themselves with their own soft rope. The doorbell rang. My daughter stood there, hair damp, face flushed. Emergency, she said. Could you watch the baby for an hour? We have to run to the pharmacy. Of course, I said. She handed me the diaper bag and rushed back to the car where my son-in-law waited, engine running. I waved at the baby and stepped back as the car sped off. I set the diaper bag on the floor. It was heavier than usual. Inside, I found a spare onesie, wipes, and a Ziploc with 2 white pills I didn't recognize, labeled in someone's careful print. For Grandma if she gets anxious. Not the pharmacy's print, someone's pen. I breathed in, breathed out. I put the bag back where she'd left it and went about the morning as if none of my senses were exploding. When she returned an hour later, she was all gratitude and hurry. You're a lifesaver, she said, kissing my cheek. The baby gurgled. I kissed my granddaughter's fingers and said to my daughter, soup later? She smiled. Maybe, she said. We both knew we were talking about something else. After they left, I took the Ziploc and placed it in my leather folder next to a sticky note I wrote, Who writes medication names in pen? I turned off the kitchen light and left the house, locking the door behind me. I walked 2 blocks and then 3 until the tightness in my chest eased. The air smelled like wood smoke and wet leaves. I looked up and the sky felt close enough to touch, the color of a bruise healing. On Monday, I sat at the table with my tea and my list. The timeline was no longer a guess. It was written in slow ink. The mislabeling, the push to sign, the policy, the notary date, the Ziploc with a small directive. I ran my finger down the page and stopped at the last line I had written. If I'm right, they'll try the medicine next. My hand went cold. My husband's voice rose in my memory. Don't grab the hand. Hold your pocket so the hand dives in. I smiled despite myself. He always was practical. I took my pillbox and emptied the nighttime slot into my palm, counted each familiar capsule, put them back. I straightened the lid one last time and looked around my kitchen. The clock, the bright dish towel, the tastefully fake plant I never water and never have to. I told the empty room, I'm ready. As the first real cold snap rolls in, I hope you find a warm blanket waiting on the couch and a good show that makes you laugh at least once. I always lay out my pills in the evenings. It's like a prayer, only more precise. That day, the capsules in my box weren't where I'd left them. My hand was accustomed to feeling the smooth ovals of the nighttime medication, but under my fingers was a rough white disc. I didn't pretend I hadn't noticed. I simply closed the lid and put the box back. In the morning, the courier rang the doorbell. Medication delivery? I hadn't ordered it. My name was on the package, and the receipt contained a medication I absolutely mustn't take with my regimen. It dilutes what's already hanging on by a thread. My son's phone number was listed under the customer's number. At the pharmacy where I called to confirm the dosage, the pharmacist, without seeing my face, confidently repeated, "Yes, the order is for Grandma. She's got high blood pressure." I thanked her and hung up. The room went completely silent, a silence in which you could hear the lock clicking on an empty cage. I didn't make a scene. I made tea as usual and smiled when the kids called to check in on me. That evening, I took the dangerous pills out of the box and replaced them with vitamins with the same glitter on the shell. I hid the dangerous medication in a honey jar, leaving a small, barely noticeable cross in pencil on the lid. I glued a miniature camera under the shelf where the lamp stands, a gift from a neighbor who works security, just in case. The opportunity had arrived. That night, I lay awake, listening to the house breathe. Someone had come in quietly, with their own key, like someone confident they had the right to enter. I lay with my eyes closed and counted my breaths. Bags rustled in the kitchen, a glass jar clinked, and a drawer slid open. In the morning, the pillbox was as neat as always, even too neat. Someone had carefully placed the lid at a right angle to the edge. I smiled in the mirror, that smile that holds its shape even when it's empty. I had everything, the receipt, the note, the jar with the pencil cross, the camera. All I could do was pretend to be tired, ready to sign whatever it takes. And remember how my husband taught me to catch thieves. Don't grab the hand, hold your pocket so the hand dives in. I placed tea and a blank sheet of paper on the table. Whoever reaches out first will find out that my last month has long since ceased to be someone else's arithmetic. I invited them for soup at noon. Pastor Jim and Brenda happened to stop by carrying a pie in a folder. The baby played on a blanket. I set the pillbox in its usual spot and the honey jar on the shelf where the lamp stands, the tiny cross winking only to me. "Mom," my daughter began, sliding a pen toward me, "while you're resting, it would be easier if—" "Soup first," I said, ladling out bowls. My son drifted to the counter like a magnet finding metal. His fingers hovered over the pillbox, then settled, gentle as a pickpocket. A soft click. The lid squared itself. I pressed play on the TV. The screen showed last night's hands unlocking my door, easing open drawers, lifting the honey jar, unscrewing, sniffing, leaving it. Then those same hands swapped pills, paused, and straightened the pillbox lid at that familiar right angle. My daughter's spoon stopped midair. My son's mouth opened and shut. "This isn't what it looks like," he said, voice dry. "Then tell me what it is," I answered. I looked at the two faces I made and loved. Inside me, the old question rose like a tide I finally chose to stand against. How could my children do this to me? Brenda set the folder on the table. "These are statements of capacity, dated and witnessed," she said. "Here's a revocation of any informal authorization to act on Evelyn's behalf. And here," she tapped the last page, "is formal notice to the insurer rescinding beneficiary changes obtained without full disclosure to the insured." Pastor Jim folded his hands. "Before anyone speaks," he said quietly, "remember we tell the truth in this house." My son rubbed his temple. "It got out of hand," he muttered. "We were scared, Mom." My daughter's eyes filled. "We thought if you signed, we could control the chaos," she whispered. "The policy—" She stopped. "The policy is canceled," I said, sliding over the insurer's email confirming suspension pending review. Tom from Family Assurance had called back after Brenda's letter. The pharmacy confirmed who placed the order. The clinic corrected the chart. The notary appointment is noted and recorded. I touched the tiny recorder on the table. I am not incapacitated. I am not signing. Silence pooled. Then I spoke the only sentence I had promised myself to say aloud. "I love you, and I will not let you harm me. Brenda's eyes flicked to mine. I nodded. She dialed. Adult Protective Services, she said calmly when the line picked up. We're reporting attempted financial exploitation and medication interference with documentation and video. The victim is present and lucid. My daughter gasped, "Mom, please, don't ruin our lives." "I'm choosing to save mine," I said, "and maybe what's left of yours." It moved quickly after that, not with drama, but with the steady weight of consequence. A PS scheduled a same-day visit. Pastor Jim stayed as witness. The officer viewed the footage, took the jar with the pencil cross, photographed the pillbox, and requested copies of the insurer's notice and the notary flags. There were no handcuffs, no shouting, just forms, measured voices, and my heartbeat slowing to something human. I changed my locks that evening. I filed new beneficiary designations that named a scholarship fund for girls in our church and small trusts for the grandkids, managed by a bank, not by family. I wrote my own advance directive, appointing Marla and Pastor Jim as the first calls, Patty as medical proxy if I truly cannot speak. I sent certified letters, access to my house revoked until further notice, all keys to be returned. The life insurance company opened an investigation into misrepresentation and reversed the 6-month-old rider. The policy now requires my in-person consent for any change, legal, financial, social, every strand pulled tight. A week later, in the church hall after service, my children stood beside me and apologized to the congregation that watched me bring casseroles for decades. They didn't confess crimes, they named harm, no theatrics, just the simple dignity of saying, we were wrong. People brought me coffee. Someone pressed a mittened hand over mine and said, "You did the right thing." I breathed easier than I had in months. As for the aneurysm, it is watched, not rushed. I walk with Marla at dusk. We count porch pumpkins and we laugh about the turkey that won't stand straight. I sleep with the window cracked again. I let the wind in. Justice didn't thunder. It arrived like good mail, stamped, signed, undeniable. And in my quiet kitchen, with the clock ticking like it always has, I laid out my pills, said my precise little prayer, and felt my life return to me piece by honest piece. What do you think is the moral here? If this story moved you, I'd love for you to subscribe, tap like, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.